Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Secure IT. This is where we discuss all things cybersecurity, people, trends, and products. So, thank you for joining us on our continuing journey. Today, we dive into an interesting segment of all things information technology, maybe a little bit of OT as well, and definitely cybersecurity. I'm loosely referring to this as the glueware that holds the entire supply chain together. Okay, guys, no more suspense. We're here today to talk about distribution, fondly referred to as disties. And our guest today has a wealth of experience, roughly about 1 million years, give or take a few. Welcome, Phillip Privett.
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, it's been quite a few years in distribution, so this should be exciting today.
Phillip, the only thing that differentiates us is one L. So we're going to go through this podcast with hello, Phillip, and here, Phillip, and there, Phillip. So let's start. Avnet. I mean, the memories came rushing back, and this is great because it allows me to, juxtaposition the disty of old, where literally we started our businesses in the '90s, and we'd rush down to disty, and we'll call a set of RAM and install it. And in those days, it was everything with a barcode. And Avnet specialized in a few lines, and as did Ingram, and as the others. And
Yep.
then the landscape slowly settled. But before we get into, the modern day description of a disty and what exactly you do, let's start with your career move, right? So, as I look through LinkedIn, and we will share all the links and conversations in our show notes. IBM field manager in I think it was Tempe, Arizona, a long time ago, to senior VP vendor management in Texas. Can you give us, the major milestones that got you here? What's your origin story? What's your superpower, Phillip?
Okay, so I would say the major milestones for me would have been, believe it or not, the acquisitions or the mergers of the distributors that I came through, right? We started, even before Avnet, I was with a company called Hallmark for a number of years. They were acquired by Avnet. And then from Avnet on to Tech Data, and then from Tech Data onto an Apollo-owned entity, and then from Apollo into a merger with TD SYNNEX, or with SYNNEX that made TD SYNNEX today.
Sure.
And so being a part of those acquisitions, and then several acquisitions made by Avnet and Tech Data over the years, right? Those are major milestones for me, and they always came with an opportunity for career development, right? Just about the time I would decide, hey, I think I need to try something else in my career, I ended up staying because the new entity provided something very different and a lot of educational opportunities. So that was a major component from a milestone standpoint. The other thing is that during my career, I had the great fortune to work for some great leaders who believed in employee development. So throughout the year, I don't think I was in a role more than 2 or 3 years at the most, with the one exception running Cisco globally. I was in finance, I was in operations, I was in, various aspects of the business from a sales perspective. So those were milestones for me because I learned something every time. It was, you talked about distribution. We used to call it LSMFT, right? Logistics, sales, marketing, finance, and technical. That's the basics of a distributor. Now it's so much more today, but at that
Sure.
time, hitting all those points made a big difference for me personally.
Wow. LSMFT. Yes, I remember the
Remember the
acronym.
slide, right?
Yes. So, TD SYNNEX has been a success story uh, from way back from the Tech Data days,
Mhm.
with a series of acquisitions, not all of which result as being part of the TDS acronym, but, it's growth continuously. And as we go through industry cycles, TD SYNNEX has been the one consistent in terms of path. Uh, Before we deep dive a little more into Disney, what's your superpower that's held you good through these years?
I think probably if I were to, it's a great question. I think if I were to say my superpower is probably finding common ground in business, right? I always think that the best possible outcomes are where everybody wins, right? So how do we How do we look at an opportunity from an acquisition, from an opportunity with a sale, from a personal relationship? It really doesn't matter. How do we find that common ground? And then how do we make a win-win or win-win-win, or, as many parties as there are, right? How do we make that happen? And I think the best scenarios are always based on trust. So for me, it's finding common ground and instilling trust, and exchanging trust, by the way.
Amazing. So let's mirror that journey of yours with what I'm going to refer to loosely, Philip, as the evolution of disties,
Oh yeah.
right? The definition of a distie has changed dramatically from what you did
Oh yeah.
30 years ago to today. So take us on, a brief journey, because I want to end up at what you do best, which is, senior VP vendor management. And we'll layer this just so that this episode is tax deductible about, cybersecurity and everything else. That's why we're
Sure.
here. But let's talk about the evolution of distie. What does a distie do? And where did we start and where are we today?
So when you think about distribution as a whole, thinking back, distribution and the idea of it goes back, well more than 100 years from a technology standpoint. Avnet, as an example, is well over 100 years old on the stock exchange, right? It's a big deal. But when you think about the basics of a distribution is working with suppliers on the line card to take their product and bring it to a wider part of the market. So really it's about scale and the ability to deliver things. It's not unlike, what some modern day versions of like an Amazon would do, right? We're an aggregator. We find ways to get product out. Over time though, and that's probably your 80s and 90s, that was basic distribution, as I said, LSMFT, right? It's your basics of getting product out, enabling partners to have conversations and to earn technical certifications, that kind of thing, and then marketing and generating demand. That's changed over time. It went from what we call more volume distribution to more of a value distribution, which is where our business partners would add value to the sale. They're doing much more in terms of consultative sale, as an example. They're the trusted advisor at the partner or to the end user. And then it evolved into what we are today, which is a little more of what we call a solution orchestrator. So essentially with a line card such as ours, we've got more than 1,500 suppliers on the line card. We're a global company. That means everything from, in the technology standpoint, from mainframe class enterprise hardware through security software, AI platforms, all the way out to laptops and desktops and security cameras and, power and cooling equipment from Schneider Electric and things like that. So it's really more of a robust, ability to bring all of those providers together for our business partners so that they can then deliver those solutions to the market. But the big key is it's the vendor relationships that we command to pull that together and then help orchestrate the delivery of that product and the sale itself. It's also a little more aligned today to enablement. So when we talk about solution orchestration, half the time, it's about solving a solution, solving a problem for a customer. At the same time, it's how do we enable the partners to have deeper conversations? How do we keep them up to speed on all the technical advancements of any number of suppliers and help them get certifications? How do we then change the conversation with the partner? Like, hey, how can we be of more value? We're a $60 billion company. We have a lot of capabilities as a $60 billion company, a lot of logistics. We have warehouses all over the world. And, so what can we do to help our partners augment their value to their customer? So that's much more than basic distribution, ever was, right? And it continues to evolve today. Now it's cloud delivery and working with the hyperscalers in addition to security platforms, in addition to cybersecurity, cyber resilience. And so it's, as the market grows, we have to continue to grow as well.
True. And volume to value sums it up very well. And as you add value, this is something that you do well, which is the solution enablement piece. So for example, you've got a highly curated offering of AI solutions and AI vendors, right? Should a VAR, a value added reseller, come to you and say, hey, I need now to ramp up and ensure that my customers are up to speed on the AI landscape, train me, let me give me the tools
Mhm.
that are most effective for me to then engage and educate my customer. So there's a lot more than just moving boxes. There's education, there's truly solution enablement. Comment on these
Oh,
various
certainly.
ecosystems,
Yeah,
please.
you've already hit on a great example in AI. We have a center of excellence we have called Destination AI. Destination AI is a global program that we have with all of our partners and our suppliers globally. As I said, global, sorry. The idea there is for partners who are interested in starting a practice, like all of a sudden, hey, maybe I'm a great infrastructure player, or maybe I'm a really good security bar. I want to add AI as a component to that. We have groups that will come in and consult with the partner. Okay, what markets do you call on today? What type of solutions are you trying to construct to take to the market? How are you going to reconstruct your business if necessary to do this? Do you need to change comp plans and comp models to support the software delivery mechanisms? And so we have a thing called Practice Builder. We will bring in practice builders where we have consultants that come in and talk to the partner, help them understand not only the market, but help them curate a use case that they can take to market. How do we build for them the suppliers that they need to solve their problem? Because it's not almost always not one supplier. It's a collection of suppliers to do a really good delivery in most cases. So it's how do we support the partner there from not only developing a business, creating a use case, creating a go-to-market plan from a marketing perspective, and then finally, how do we work with them over time to deliver those solutions? A lot of partners, by the way, may come up with a great solution, but they don't have the ability to scale their implementation talent. So we have groups in what we call Service Solve, where the partner can leverage our people that do AI implementations to come in, and they can actually sell our services to come in white labeled with a partner to do the delivery until they get capable of doing it. So it's really about servicing everything they need from beginning to end to take a solution to market. So is that
Good.
your
And
answer?
you are stronger for it. So Philip, I never know where these podcasts are going to go. I like the long form. You say something, we deep dive, and we're having fun. So I'm going to spend just a little more time on the concept.
Sure.
And I want to talk about vendor management. So you're leading vendor management for TD SYNNEX. What's vendor management?
So if you think about it this way, as a distributor, we need people doing the delivery of the actual sales function, right? They're booking and ordering and working with partners to do quotes and delivery and get the products on order. We have the logistics groups. But from a product management standpoint, vendor management, our job is to work with the supplier. So instead of facing the customer 90% of the time, we face the suppliers 90% of the time. We're the ones working with the supplier to do a couple of things. First and foremost, bringing the strategy of the supplier through TD SYNNEX to our partners, right? It's not just, as I said earlier, LSMFT, right? It's not just the basics. It's how are we creating demand and enablement at the partner level and bringing them up to speed. So that means we've got to work with the suppliers on how to do that. Many suppliers, I happen to be on the phone with the one today. They're big and getting bigger all the time, but they still are not as robust as they could be to take advantage of the scale of the bar market, right? So we're working with them to construct their new partner plan. So that means MDF investment, so market development fund. It means how are you going to train and enable? Are you going to build a program that says a partner has a certain status based on the level of technical certifications they have? So the product management and vendor management team, that's what we do with the suppliers. We work with them on the strategy. We work with them on the methodology for delivery, and we work with them in terms of taking their product to market. So we all have business plans, budgets about NVIDIA as an example, a very large AI partner, right? They've got a great product. They've got a great portfolio. How do we enable the partners to take advantage of that? So that's where the vendor management team spends our day, working with the suppliers to direct that through us to the customer.
Got it. And
That fair?
a little footnote for our audience. They may hear the term supplier, vendor, or OEM interchangeably. This is the same ecosystem that we're used to on the demand side, with various value-added resellers. There's disti, and then there's the vendor or the OEM manufacturer. So, thank you for that deep dive into what exactly vendor management is. How can a VAR, so VAR is a customer of yours who comes to you and says, look, you know what, I'm doing business, and I need to know where I can use your help to strengthen various focuses with our customer. Now, in the rush for business, and God only knows this is a highly competitive field.
Yeah.
Well, we start with, let's go to the customer, let's create demand. It's what the customer wants, right? It's no longer we've got the best horse carriage to sell. It's look, what is it do you want, and how can I fulfill your needs? The moment we understand that metric, Tiffany Bowa, who does this well, says, look, the moment you actually listen to your customer, you've got your 5-year plan and you've got your success. The key part is listening to the customer. So the vendor management piece is much ignored. We're in a hurry to get POs. We're in a rush to get it to disti. We're quick to negotiate the best possible price, get it delivered, proof of delivery, invoice, AR, done, rinse and repeat, right? The vendor management piece, our VARs tend to gain from managing vendors better. There's things like taking them on the road, like doing roadmap with the customer. There's QBRs, there's MDFs, there's actual plans, marketing plans. Comment on that. I've probably summarized it already, but please comment on how our VARs can do vendor management better.
So I'll give you, I'm going to come at it from a different angle, but
Please.
a good example of that, right? When we're working with some of the suppliers, like they may have some of the vendors, OEMs, will have go-to-market plans for products in the market through in a lot of cases, their reps in the field, right? How do we create those, what we call a 4-legged sales call, right? Where you partner the right vendor with the right reseller to deliver in a given market to a given vertical. So when you think about the density of business partners in the United States in terms of, resellers, there's a lot of resellers in the market, right? So how do you pick the best ones? So part of the job of vendor management is curating those partner selections and how do they work together to get that out in the field. The other part is though, what happens when they get in the field? How do we make those connections at the local level in the market? So let's say they're in Omaha or they're in Chicago or they're in, it doesn't really matter. How do you make those connections and build them in such a way where the partner that we're enabling is built and ready to handle that product or the solution with the reseller rep? And then at the same time, in a lot of cases, by the way, we work with the suppliers to say, look, it's all about selling your product, but your product doesn't get sold alone. You need, as an example, if you're going to sell data center infrastructure, you're going to have to talk about networking. You're going to have to talk about security. You're going to have to talk about cyber resilience, right? And to your point earlier, I loved your point about listening, because that's the critical point. At the end of the day, one of probably the best things I've ever done was teach myself to listen more, actively listen, because it's not about selling the box. It's about solving the problem. And if you solve the problem, inevitably you have a bigger sale. And not only that, you become, and in most cases, you become that trusted advisor now. Okay, these are the people that I know to go to because I trust them. They did a good job for me in the past. And by the way, sometimes that also means, for those on the phone that want to be in sales someday, the other thing is sometimes the right answer is, I'm not a specialist at that. I'll find you someone who is. But if I'm not that person, it's okay to tell somebody that, right? There's people out there that will deliver this solution for you better. You can be the conduit to get them in the connection. You don't have to always be that. That really builds those relationships well with those supplier reps. They appreciate that.
I totally agree.
But it also is about building business plans. We talked about that. I mean, that's what we do today with partners. We help them understand how to build a really good, meaty go-to-market plan, like an actual business plan, to develop a practice and work with the suppliers and deliver that practice and create solutions in the market. Now that is a local challenge. That's not a corporate challenge. Like, how do you do that in market? So that's something we have to focus on a lot.
Okay. I'm sorry. One more. This is a lot of fun. So TD SYNNEX does something really good. You're creating communities. You're creating I wouldn't use the word ecosystems. You're creating peer groups.
Mhm.
And this is much like the Starbucks syndrome where, there'll be the restaurant row or 1 mile of 11 Starbucks because,
Yeah.
if you want coffee, you're going to hit one of them, right? And then take that model here in the communities that TD SYNNEX is creating. And it's not necessarily about, oh my gosh, this is my competition and I'm never going to talk to him. But we're saying, but you're bringing groups together to foster and enhance and build. Efficiencies is a bad word in today's in today's environment, but you actually, each of these peers are helping each other thrive, right? And so maybe 10 seconds on this, and I promise we'll move to
No,
cybersecurity.
I am great. I am great. I love distribution. As you can tell, I've been in it my entire
Yeah,
career, but I would position what you said is accurate, but also a little different, right? We're creating ecosystems. At the end of the day, just because you compete with this other partner doesn't mean you can't collaborate when maybe one of you is better at a certain solution than another. And then that is reciprocated in the market, right? Now I've got a relationship with somebody else in this community. I might actively compete with them some days, but I might partner with them on other days because of a solution that they bring to the market better than I can, or one that I don't offer,
absolutely.
I want to bring in. Those communities are for that, as well as for growing, right? Because trying to talk in groups of like-minded resellers at the same size and type, or maybe I'm a $10 million reseller in the market and I'm talking to a $50 million reseller because there's vast differences in being a $50 million company and a $10 million company. Now
Absolutely.
I need a CFO. I don't need a controller. I need, there's all these different things that have to change. I have to get a little more specific about my market. I have to be very focused on where I'm trying to take my company. All those things change. So putting those communities together is critical. And frankly, some of the best results that I think we've ever seen is creating these communities of companies and letting them talk. I mean, we'll start conversations and just let it happen, right? Create networking time for them to talk, right? I
It's
think,
a powerful concept.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a powerful concept, and it's hang around the people that you want to be. Right? That's the key, right? Like you said, 10 million to 50 million. Okay, finally, Phillip, through the matter at hand.
that's right.
So, we are in the midst of a set of solutions that will probably never ever go away. It's cybersecurity.
Yeah.
We do things to protect and risk mitigate, and the bad guys get better at it, and then we get better than the bad guys, and then the bad guys get better than us, and it's a constant cycle. Reminds me of one of those Tom and Jerry cartoons. But you've been on an interesting foray. You were talking about cybersecurity and cyber resilience, and I will point our listeners to a few papers that you've actually published online to this topic. So let's talk about the much bandied about cybersecurity, a term we're very familiar with, and let's juxtaposition that with cyber resilience. Why are they different but equally important?
I certainly give you my point of view on it, right? And I'm sure you have one as well, right? Because your history and background. But I look at it in this fashion, right? Cybersecurity is about how do we defend and how do we create this wall between us and the bad guys, essentially, right? As you said, it's evolving constantly. Now AI is being leveraged to make that even harder for us, right? So how do you create cyber protected passwords? Upcoming, how do you create quantum compute passwords?
Amen.
Cyber, right? So
Amen.
all of this is changing right on real time with us. In fact, AI is just making it so much worse because the rate of change is so fast now. So it's really about building the wall. Think of a castle, right? Where we separate it out, and we've been talking about this for a while at TD SYNNEX, is cyber resilience. Cyber resilience is what happens after the penetration, right? After I've been hacked, or after my data's been taken, or somebody took my network down. It's about remediation. It's about recovery. I look at those as kind of two different things. They're very tightly coupled, but I looked at them as two different things. You think of companies like, in cyber resilience, your Palo Altos and, your Fortinets of the world. And then cyber resilience is your Veeam, your Cohesity, those type of entities. So it's about how do I maintain an an IT strategy that has cybersecurity blocking the bad guys as often as possible, and cyber resilience to keep me as nearly as close as I can be to full back online quickly. Things that, you have some of these companies that do real-time flash backup. So they're basically backing up your real-time data and keeping it in a certain capacity, whatever that capacity you want is, for a period of time, so that you're constantly refreshing it. So if you go down, you're instantly back up. That's the theory. How fast can you go back up to current state? A lot of people can come. If you look at what happened with like MGM and a couple of companies, in the last couple of years, they're down and it took them months to recover. How do you recover in minutes, not months? So to
Good
us,
question.
yeah, and that is to me cyber resilience
Well, got it.
as it is
Uh,
cybersecurity, right?
okay, we're going to deep dive a bit into this concept. Um, let's start with what are you doing for your partners in terms of building cyber resilience into their practice?
So today, probably the best example is we built a core group in the vendor management team that is specific to cyber resilience. So we've taken the suppliers that are cyber resilient specific, some of the ones I mentioned as an example, and pulled them all into a similar vendor management team. So that team understands the language, the go-to-market, the strategy, the positioning with the cybersecurity groups, et cetera. So it brings a depth of expertise when we're talking to the partners about building those practices. We pulled them together. Now, what we've done that's a little unique, but we have to worry about, you've got the large players, the HPs, the NetApps, the Dell, that have components of this in their business. IBM, as an example, has this in their business as well. So we have vendor management teams that are specialists in those large expansive platforms and the components of them, because they have a breadth of technology. But where somebody is very specific about what they do, we have pooled those into a resource pool that allows them to understand the market and everything specific to it. So imagine a cyber resilience pool of information and suppliers that we have today in our cyber resilience team. And then they all have, if you would, think of it as dotted lines out to the other suppliers, and have those components that we pull into solutions as well. Things like IBM has Invisi, as in sustainability software, right? But there's other ones in there for automation and for cyber resilience as part of their storage platforms. How do you pull all those things together in a solution that, if you're trying to pull these things together? So it's about just concentrating the IP, basically.
Got it. So you help partners build cyber resilience and there's a tertiary layer. There's AI.
Mm-hmm.
There's the constant ongoing impact of AI. And choose your words carefully, Philip, because you also said quantum, and I want to talk about quantum in a second. But let's take AI first, like one
Yeah,
step at a time, because we're moving a million miles a minute. So
we are.
the impact of AI on both cybersecurity and cyber resilience. If I'm a VAR today and I just heard you, I mean, it's like nailing jello. It's like, where do I start?
Yeah, I think AI is going to have a massive impact on not only cyber resilience, but cybersecurity, right? It's just, we know that that's going to happen. I'm probably the best answer to the question that I can come up with right now is, when you're looking at the implications of AI, you've got to worry about your cloud automation. You've got to worry about increasing regulatory for cyber, decentralization of your digital capacities, all these things that AI is going to be affecting over the next couple of years. I mean, that's, just in case you haven't noticed, by Thursday, your toaster will have AI. Like, everything's going to have AI in it, right? If you listen to everybody, right? So how do you take an environment that has that much AI and then build your cybersecurity and your cyber resilience in such a way that AI is used to basically defend versus just be an expansive opportunity for additional services like workloads, right? There's a lot of places where you can do things through touch and through, and then you're going up to agentic AI, and then you're in physical AI with robotics, right? You've got to be able to steal and protect all of those from a cybersecurity standpoint. And you've also got to worry about how you remediate those issues when there is a hack. Because, by the way, like I know, everybody's going to get hacked. It's just a question of when and how hard. So the big question for us is that's why cyber resiliency is so different for us. It's how do you respond when it happens, right? Um, but it's also a big opportunity, right? At the same time, AI is going to make things, um, it has an opportunity to make things a lot easier for a lot of us, a lot more speed of production, but it also means, you can use it, as I said earlier, to combat the negative assets where AI is being thrown at you, right? In terms of hacking, because, you're not going to be able to stop it. The bad guys have it too. It's just the way it
Absolutely.
is. I mean,
I know you were probably joking about the AI toaster, but it's not next Thursday, Philip. It's 2 Thursdays back. I just
probably.
saw my neighbor who's across the street's wife is this brilliant sous chef, and
Really?
she gets to test all these latest devices, and she brings this cube over because I'm always a little grumpy if the toast is not perfect, right? And so she brings this device, and I kid you not, okay, it's a cube. It's about a foot and a half by a foot and a half by a foot and a half, and it's got shelves, and I think it's called Bravo. And you put your toast in the first shelf, your eggs in the second, your beans and sides and whatever you want, and you hit a button. It scans, it takes pictures, and you tell it what toast to color. How do you want your eggs? This technology is here today.
I can't
And,
wait to tell my friend.
yeah, I'll
That's
probably
awesome.
send the link to you. It's uncanny. So we are living in
Yeah.
exciting times.
Yeah.
No doubt about this, right? And before we delve into going forward as a VAR, I want to touch on um, quantum computing only because it's your fault and you started it. So so here's quantum computing, right? As it stands, and we've done a couple of conversations with subject matter experts.
Mhm.
The scariest thing I heard was that quantum computing could stand to erase encryption as we know it, right? Because the speeds at which you can now break data down, encryption becomes meaningless. And you mentioned quantum passwords. I don't even know where to start, but I'm thinking there's got to be biometrics involved because that's where we stand to get unique, right? I mean, how long a password are we going to have? And that the multi-factor now has to lean on sound and retina scans
Retinal
and
scan, right? Yep.
whatever else, right? Millennials or even the Gen Ys and the Gen Xs are saying, look, maybe you fast forward cassette tapes to get your music. I can just walk into a room and ask Siri to play my favorite music.
Mhm.
Why do I need to type passwords? Why can I just walk into a room and you know who I am? So comment on the impact of, quantum computing is, I'm guessing, 3 to 5 years away from commercial
Mhm.
implementation in its nascency. Comment on what does it look like to you?
So light speed computing, basically, right? From a quantum perspective, I think it's probably 5 years out. They exist today in a lot of labs.
Absolutely.
IBM's a great example of that, where they've got quantum compute already up and running. They are looking at the opportunity for quantum, eventually quantum as a service, even, right?
Right.
But this is not something you're going to build in every data center, right? For obvious reasons, right? At least not for many, many, probably a decade or more, right? Just the technology and the physics required to build it. Um, the challenge with it is, once again, you can have people developing quantum compute, but for bad threat actors as well. Like, how do I hack in? I mean, this is probably now you're into the countries as adversaries kind of thing, right? How do we have a digital war where, we're using quantum compute to crack our codes and vice versa, right? So it's a little bit of a scary proposition when you think about the speed. The best example I've ever heard of, and I'm sure you've seen it, is, hey, here's the graph that shows how long it takes for somebody to break your code, your password,
Ab-
based on the number of
Absolutely.
digits and combinations, right? And some of it's like 30 years. Quantum compute, it's like 28 seconds.
Correct.
It's just ridiculous. So the question, once again, it becomes like AI. How will we potentially leverage AI in a quantum environment to be that protective device against the threat from a quantum compute in an aggressive, from an aggressive party, no matter who it is, right? Could be hackers, it could be whatever, but it's not that far out. It's really not that far out. The only thing that makes it gives you a little bit of peace is the fact that it is not simple. It is it's the equivalent of, building a nuclear bomb in the 50s, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Oh
work and a
yeah,
lot of IP in that thing. So it's not going to
right.
be everywhere, but the IP is there. I mean, the capability is there if you have the money to do it.
You
Uh,
could.
it's not that far out. We have them today. We have them
Yeah.
today. It's a
Yeah.
question of practical application is the question.
I mean, it's like trying to balance an egg on the dashboard as you're going through,
Right.
a high-speed chase, right? The technology is there, but it's very delicate. Um,
For sure.
Thank you. So, very interesting conversation, and we're going to shift and look forward.
Okay.
Not very far away in our times. There are certain things that are happening. Of course, we've talked about AI. There's governance, regulation, and compliance.
Mhm.
Today, we've got to end customers have a lot more to adhere to, whether it's payroll responsibilities in California, which is right up there in terms of, reporting and everything else. And uh, there's overall laws. I mean, if you take privacy, for example, 50 states have 50 laws when it comes to hitting that consent button at the bottom of your browser. And on a recent trip to Europe, I found that experience very relieving. It was the same kind of website format that said, hey, look, do you want to accept it or do you want to reject it? So we're not there yet in terms of end user experience, in terms of privacy specifically. We still have 50 states with 50 laws, if not more than that. However, this is something that our end customer has to deal with in terms of maintaining data. Part of your solutions is storage because of the high volumes of data that are being generated by AI. This is what businesses have to think about. And then there is the need for data. There's this Pac-Man like AI that needs more and more and more data to grow and get faster and better. So these are, conflicting concepts. Privacy on that one hand, the need for vast amounts of data to get AI better and train better on the other hand. Recently, I've just, and I'm going to name a vendor, and I promise we have no sponsorships, but McAfee's tool actually allows me now to go in and say, do you want to take out your name um, from these 17 databases? And you could have knocked me over with a feather when you see that, right? So that we're getting there. This is something that Europeans have lived with, for a few years with GDPR and everything else.
Right.
It gives us the ability it gives the Europeans the ability to hit a button and say, look, I don't want my data anywhere. We're slowly getting there. So now for the point at hand, what are the challenges business owners, customers, VARs face? What are you seeing in the near term in terms of the landscape?
In terms of the landscape around data privacy, particularly,
Private, just various technologies, AI, GRC, uh, you know, data privacy.
I think there's always a big problem with data privacy. I mean, being a Fortune company, we have data privacy rules and regulations. In fact, because we're global, we practice under GDPR. So some of that same regulations we have to meet globally. We use here, right, as part of our security strategy, right? In fact, we as a company, we have trainings we have to go through annually about data privacy and what we're allowed to do and not do, right? So we're very cautious about that. I think we're going to continue to see more of that data privacy regulation coming into the states. It needs to be, frankly. I don't know about you. I get spammed every day.
Oh,
And I
absolutely.
didn't, I got spammed probably during this call. So the
Right.
question is, how do we go about, improving that experience, like you mentioned with your security supplier, right? How do we go away and do more of that work? Because I think everybody would enjoy that. Counter to that, it is more about data with AI. How do we handle the analytics of a market outside the privacy of your name and address and phone number, right? I mean, because I think there's a balance there. Um, and once again, without a ton of thought, I would say there is a balance between the amount of data that we can analyze and acquire versus the content of that data being very specific to a human being. I think that's the balance that we'll have to strike in the market, because the value of AI is hard to first. It's in some ways it's hard to comprehend just because you can boil an ocean thinking about AI, right? All the
Absolutely.
applications in cancer research and thermonuclear, analysis and just, and drug creations and things like that. At the same time, I don't need to know your name and address to do that calculation. So there's a balance. I think we'll end up having to find that balance. I think one of the challenges we've had as a country is coming into play and putting guardrails up around AI and what's available to it and not available to it. I think you will.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, cyber security to cyber resilience to AI risk mitigation
Mhm.
coming soon to a theater near you.
Okay.
Absolutely right, Philip. It's amazing in terms of the evolutions. On a quick 5-second aside, I'm sure, and I want you to validate this for me, that your storage solutions are probably seeing an uptick post AI.
Oh yeah, certainly. Actually, I'm going to give you a quick, if you don't mind, kind of an idea.
No, please.
Part of the value of AI, and this is not necessarily technically hyper accurate, but it's close, right? You generally want to do your AI, especially if you're doing your crunching calculations, relatively close proximity to your storage application,
Yep.
right? And you generally want to do that over an ultra low latency network, right? I want to take my very fast network and put it between my storage, preferably flash, right? Because I want speed, and I want my GPUs over here so I can make the fastest possible decision. If I'm in instances like Wall Street, where I'm calculating stock practices and prices and things like that, right? So how do you build these environments? Now, storage, because of the data, is obviously growing left and right. But I'd say in a lot of cases, so is the networking that facilitates that. And so is the compute with the GPUs, like, some of the suppliers have announced. I think what you'll see this year, and I'm not going to quote the specs because I can't, I'm not quite as specific as I need to be on this one. But generally, AI is still going to continue to grow at a heavy rate. But this year in particular, modernization of your infrastructure is growing at a similar, if not greater rate, because everybody's correcting their infrastructure in support of AI applications going forward. So it's, and that has nothing to do with any of the other tariffs and all that stuff. I mean, if you're going to run a really good AI application, and you're going to drag in a lot of GPUs, you better have access to power. You might be building a data center that needs cooling for some of the really big systems, or you need to have really good cloud access providers for GPUs as a service. In which case, and it's a question, do you put your applications entirely in the cloud storage as well, or do you do that data on-prem? Because I've seen a lot of people pull that data back on-prem, but they want control of their data, right?
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of that too. So
Well,
yeah, so storage is picking up. A lot of storage suppliers. That's the story, right?
right.
But I guess my point is really this: to net it out, it's not just the storage, absolutely on storage, but dragging along with that networking and compute, absolutely all coming up at the same time, right? Because everybody's trying to build that application farm for their AI apps.
It's very interesting. We're so focused on compute power and NVIDIA CEO saying, look, I'm sitting here at the endpoint processing all your AI requests, but you bring up a great point. Like, look, the closer the storage solution or the entire solution enablement is when it comes to AI for storage, if these work in harmony in terms of, an upgraded architecture, the better the results. That's something for our listeners to think about. So now to the fun part, Philip. Are you ready? I am rubbing my hands here in excitement. So
Okay.
well done. We're going to do something fun as we usually end, because this is more about, the man or the man rather than what you do, right? And our listeners love to know more about the person. And we opened with your journey, and I want to close with you. So a few quick questions.
Okay.
If you had a billboard, so a month where you lived by, or something that touched you, maybe recently or for the last 30 years in the business, the question is, if you had a billboard.
If I had a billboard, it'd be one of two billboards, to be fair. I'm going to take a little
So
liberty.
you're going for two billboards.
My
now.
billboard would say listen more, because I struggle with that every day. I do. I feel but it's what I tell myself every day: listen more. And then if it was a business side, I'd say, buy from TD SYNNEX, because I drink our Kool-Aid every day. We have a great we are an amalgamation of a lot of great companies, and the best stuff makes it to the top. And you know that you're in this industry, right? It's, I think we are as good as anybody in the market today. And I would say buy from us, right? Cause we are going to be there for you.
Nice people. I couldn't agree. I'll do one better. Listen more. This board sponsored by TD SYNNEX. How's that?
That
You
work.
get to pull it off with one board. Thank you. That was good. How about great reads? A book you recommend or a book that you keep in
Okay.
your guest bedroom for visitors to read, or you're happy to share a copy.
Okay. No jokes, but this is an old book. And I say old, it was from probably 2000, 2001 timeframe. It's called Tipping Point, The Tipping Point.
Oh, absolutely.
The reason I dusted it, I dusted it last week. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back and read this because think about where we are today with AI. Think about where we are today in the socioeconomic climate. These are all tipping points. And the successes of companies are based on times where you have this inflection point, right? How do you handle your business through this time frame or leveraging this technology? Because those times don't come very often. Or when they do, you have to be ready to take advantage of them quickly. So how do you recognize those points? And that was a great book about how, brands came and went, and then they came back because of a tipping point in the market. So I'm trying to use that with some of my mentees to get them think out of the box a little bit about how to take advantage of things in the market. So
Nice.
tipping point.
Gladwell coming with a tipping point revisited?
Oh, that actually, yeah, that's what you think about it. Yeah.
Pretty cool. Okay, Phillip, music.
I am all over the map. I literally, my wife laughs at me all the time because she's very much country and Western.
I figured.
And I'm kind of a Southern rock guy, country Western. I love classical music. I actually like opera. I am literally all over the map. And it just depends on what time of day you hit me with what I'm listening to.
I'm trying to vision you with a cowboy hat, boots, and sitting in a local opera house. But you know what? That works. Nicely done. Historical
I'm more of the classical side. I'm a Tchaikovsky kind of guy. I lean that way, but sometimes it's an opera component. So
very nice. Historical figures. Anyone come to mind?
Teddy Roosevelt. I'll tell you, I have an odd reason there. All my kids, my youngest son was a Boy Scout, and we were the Rough Riders. So we had kind of used the whole Teddy Roosevelt theme as our kind of our mantra because of what he did. He was pervasive in a lot of ways. And he didn't have he faced challenges head on. And there's a lot of things there that I always appreciated. The more I got to learn and read about him, the more I appreciated his, the guy got shot one time and finished his speech. Yes, that is sticking with your program, right? He is, there's a lot of interesting things about him. There's a lot of great people in history. I am actually a big history buff. I love history as a whole. But if I were to nail it down, he's probably a good example. Yeah, he's a good example from a historian figure.
Yeah, love it. Last one, lessons from grandma.
I have I think probably not a unique story, but I think it's a little unique for me. My grandmother was one of 13. She had a lot of brothers, grew up in North Alabama. All of them had woodworking shops. My grandmother, from a very early age, kids would get, toys. I would get power tools.
Wow.
And I would help her build things all the time. She would get out in her backyard and they would build things. It could be greenhouses. It could be picnic tables. It could be whatever. And she taught me not to be afraid to try something. You could take a good look at something and say, you know what, I can do that. And you go home and build it. And if you didn't build it right, you learned, and then you built it right the next time. And it was kind of the family thing as well. Most of her brothers had workshops, so we could go see woodworking. That's back when a lot of people made their own furniture in a lot of ways. So I learned not to be afraid of things. I will try it.
I've asked this question many times. This is the first grandma that is a purveyor of power tools. More power to you, Phillip. Beautiful.
That was my gift. I'm telling you, that's a statement of fact.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. Phillip, thank you again. This was excellent and very informative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this episode of Secure IT as I continue the cybersecurity discussion with customers, vendors, end users, and distributors, helping us to learn from their insights and knowledge and experience. I think we just got a deep dive into about 30 years of some pretty serious evolution in our space. And I'm going to do a double take once this podcast is ready for production. Well done. Make sure to follow this podcast for free on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, or wherever your podcasts are hosted. Please do DM me on LinkedIn, Twitter with your feedbacks, questions, comments, kudos. You can leave the complaints out. Thanks again, and see you next month.